Vive la résistance.
We met in Marseille.
Yeah. We met in Marseille. What was the first?
Oh, at Deep at the coffee shop.
Oh, that's right. Okay, well, I guess we can just make an advertisement. For anyone going to Marseille, they should really go to Deep. It was sort of the meeting ground, unexpectedly and quite often. And we had a lovely little casual meeting there for the first time.
We went there so often that one of the baristas was actually cast in the show. So that's how much that the whole production went to Deep.
He just happened to be a classical guitarist.
Yes.
And so there's a sequence in maybe episode 6.
The surrealist party scenes.
Yeah, and he's playing classical guitar. He was our barista.
I heard about it first when my agent sent me an email, and the casting obviously had a different title. The project name was different, and then I just Googled certain things that happened in that time, and I found out about the Emergency Rescue Committee, and I had no idea about them before. And as much as I try as much as I can to be aware of certain things, I wasn't. And then I found a book called In Exile, and in this book, like, it basically historically shows the entire timeline of exile from, I think, the 18th century up until now. And there's so many different, just to like put this out there, there's so many different committees of different people who have helped in various ways throughout the history of time, but nobody knows about them because we lose this kind of history. So I'm very happy that through the series we're able to bring it to more people, you know.
And I read that there are also like some parallels in your own life history with your grandfather, who did some kind of the same things, right?
Yeah, same I wouldn't say, just because my grandfather, he was in this way, let's say, lucky that he was not on a list. He was lucky that, it's crazy to say, yeah, so I'm hesitating about how to formulate the sentence, but he's lucky that he was only seen as a quarter Jew in that time, and was able to stay until the identity checks were happening more and more. And then he was like, well, he tried to assassinate Hitler in the streets of Prague. And after a failed assassination, let's call it that, he went back to Austria and thought, okay, I'm just gonna let this happen. I don't know what's going on. And then there were more and more identity checks. And then they looked at him because of his, in the propaganda of the Nazis, Jewish looks. And then he escaped. He escaped, yeah. With a suitcase full of condoms, he escaped. It's a true story. Yeah, because he was told that people need condoms in America. He was told that he should sell them there, but unfortunately they said rubbers, and he thought of condoms, but they actually meant school rubbers. Crazy.
Well, I heard the story from my father, because actually he was walking through Potsdamer Platz and he noticed that there was a Varian Freistrasse. And so he said, you know, I knew a couple of people who were involved in the Emergency Rescue Committee. He knew them, of course, a long time later, like when they were older, because Albert Hirschman and Lisa Fittko both came to America after this story and became Americans. And when they were older people, my father separately happened to meet both of them in different contexts. And so he had heard the story from two different people. And it was one of those stories about how amazing stories about how people survived and got out of Europe and came to America. So he told me this story, and that was how I originally heard about it. And it was after the period of time in 15 and 16 when so many refugees moved to Germany and moved to Berlin, and all of us were engaged in helping them to resettle in Berlin, that I started to think that it was so interesting that, you know, people like us had to leave Berlin as refugees, but then now people were coming and seeking refuge in Berlin, and it was kind of an amazing circle of history. So I started to revisit this material with the idea of making it into a series.
Also tatsächlich muss ich ehrlich gestehen, dass mir das vorher nicht so ein Begriff war. Und ich dann eigentlich in der Arbeit eher diese Hilfsorganisation kennengelernt habe und natürlich auch sehr bewundere. Ja, Wahnsinn, was die da machen. Gibt's ja immer noch. IRC dann, ja.
The project for me was kept under wraps, so it had like a secret name, and the character had a secret name, so I didn't know it was about Varian Fry. So I was really pulled in because it was a project with Anna Winger. And then once Anna invited me for a meeting, they shared that it was Varian Fry and that it was based on Julie's novel, The Flight Portfolio. And so I got the book and I tried to read as much as possible before taking this meeting and looking up Varian. And I was just so amazed that there was this American hero that no one knew anything about. And so I was really enthusiastic to talk about the show.
And you, Jayne?
It's very similar, yes. I read what we were sent, and I didn't either know what the true story was, but I recognized immediately that this was the sort of role that I'd been wanting to play and kind of looking for and searching for. So I was immediately excited just based on the role of Mary Jane, which had a fake name at that. I can't remember what the code name was. And then when I learned about the real story, I was so blown away. Yes, this is a story that I don't think is known in the U.S. really, not widely at all. So it was once again, yeah, absolutely incredible. And then once we arrived in Marseille and I saw, there's a plaque to Varian Fry outside the American consulate, and it was a bit more known in Marseille, but I still don't think a widely known story at all. But I was just so amazed by these characters, the real life story, and I was so lucky to be cast in this part.
When my mom told me about the story of my grandfather and brought that back to my present mind place, I had this point of connection. I had this point of, wow, history is being forgotten. I am forgetting my history. And we're forgetting history in a certain way also to defend ourselves from not being a part of something that could again be attacked, right? So Albert, for me, he is in this place where suddenly he finds himself in nowhere land and he knows his values. I mean, this is not a guy who's just I, as Lucas, am much more naive than he is, but he's a very studied man. He's somebody who has been he has a PhD at the time that we meet him, he has a PhD in economics. He fought in 2 wars, He comes to Marseille and he's burning. He's burning in between of this place of I need to save Europe, but I am being persecuted. How can I do what? And he was quite a witty guy, He was a very optimistic guy. So for me to encounter this man and to be able to open up a part of myself that has these values, but that kind of also through just the path of becoming more and more a part of the arts industry or the film world where you try so much to fight for your own path that you can forget that if you fight for the path of others, that's actually how you're going to get forward with others together, and things are going to be much bigger than you could ever imagine. And so Albert, in a way, he brought that back to me in so many ways, on the hand of working with the International Rescue Committee myself now together, but also on the way of oh wait, it's not about me. It's not about me. And I'm not alone. And man, I could talk to you about it for hours about this man. The real Albert as well, right? His writings, his words, everything. I'm very, very, very happy I was able to study this man for a little bit.
Ich war total begeistert. Ich fand einfach ich liebte das Tempo und die Leichtigkeit und den Humor, aber es ist einfach, es trifft genau den perfekten Spagat zwischen Humor und aber auch Tragik und so, und ich fand das wahnsinnig lebendig. Ich mochte, dass es viele Sprachen gibt, macht die Welt ein bisschen größer, und das ist ja auch das, was tatsächlich in Marseille stattfand, ne? Also diese Vielsprachigkeit. So, also ich mochte es sehr.
You go first.
Okay. There's a fair amount written about Varian. Particularly, there's a biography by Annie Marino that I found very useful. And Varian's writings, his journalism, his correspondence leading up to this period of his life, during and after, From like, there's accounting from his time in Marseille, photos, random ephemera, and it's all stored at Columbia University Rare Books and Manuscript Library, which is in New York City where I live. And so I was able to go there and sign out these boxes over the course of days and go through his things and take photos. You know, and I'm holding letters to and from Eleanor Roosevelt and Marcel Duchamp, and it's like, of course the content was really useful, but there was also something strangely sacred about knowing that I'm playing a real person, and though I'm not imitating him, you know, or impersonating in any way, like feeling his things, you know, holding these photos that he had developed from his trips, felt really special. And so I felt sort of connected. And there was in the back of one folder, he had this white handkerchief with his initials embroidered on it in a very specific pattern. So I gave it to our costume designer, Justine Seymour. And I was like, hey, can you just like make up a few of these? So you don't see them on screen, but I had them with me, and it was like a nice little tangible piece of Varian that I carried on with me.
See why I'm intimidated by him? So Mary Jane Gold wrote a memoir, which I was able to read, which was very helpful. And, you know, there is certainly differences in the story that we're telling versus the strict facts of the story. So, but there are also, the overall journey is the same. There's a, you know, star-crossed lover, short-lived romance that also happened to her in Marseille during this period, even though it wasn't with Albert. So emotionally, it's the same sort of arc of, and exactly that line that Cory was referencing of, I've never felt so alive. You know, I read where she said that this was the most important year of her life. And so I think you don't want to have the knowledge of being in 2023 when you're playing the role, but I think these two people also knew that they were in the midst of an extraordinary moment when they were in Marseille, part of the ERC. So I think that you have that sort of awareness as a character and as an actor that this is the most consequential time of my life.
There were no eyewitnesses that we could, or not that we knew of, that we could talk to. But again, in Marseille, people know the story. It's not, people outside Marseille maybe less, but there were historians. There was a lot to read. There was the Shoah Foundation collects testimony from people who experienced many things in World War II and in the Holocaust. And we watched interviews from the Shoah Foundation archive with many people involved in the ERC. So that was also helpful. And you know, I mean, there's the process of doing the research, and then there's the process of creating the fiction, right? And we did a lot of research about what was happening in Marseille, about the characters, about that moment in history in 1940 where, you know, Britain is being flattened, and Germany is fascist, Northern France is fascist, Italy is fascist, Spain is fascist, and things are looking really bad for the future. It's a pretty dark moment. And this free zone in Marseille is like the last place left, you know, and everybody is sort of bottlenecked in the same place, which makes it this very rich kind of crossroads to explore in a series. But, you know, and then we started creating the fiction, and I have to say, I felt like the city was really a character in the show. It's such a special location. We all moved there to make it. We were all there for like 6 months, and it was a very immersive experience to all be there together.
I think we get along better in real life than the two of them on screen. I actually really wish we had more interaction on screen, because it brought out a very specific flavor in Varian that I didn't get to have often. This level of agitation, yes, that I found really actually very useful. Because Varian was hyper reliant on Mary Jane. Mary Jane was funding the operation, and so Like any great businessman, you don't want to upset the money. But the problem is
the money's a little erratic in your decision making.
So it was like the antagonism. It was not born out of resentment so deeply about like I don't like this person. It's just I would like Varian wanted control. Varian had wanted things to sort of be organized. He wanted to know what was happening, and she was a bit of a live wire, and. I didn't want to like dig into the misogyny, but considering the era, I think that was also played into part of it. But I really found a lot of energy, and I think there's some really great comedy in this, in the agitation that lived between the two of us.
It's a really interesting conflict because they have the same goal, but their methodology is very different. And I think by the end of the series, there is a begrudging acknowledgement of how much they share in common. What personally they're sort of going through ends up being kind of similar, even though they don't really speak openly with each other about it. I think that they're having kind of parallel experiences personally, and they're also very invested in their task, in the mission that they're trying to accomplish. They share a lot in common, but they have some key differences which cause conflict.
There's a beautiful moment at the end of the series that feels quite meta, just talking about the impact of the experience of being in Marseille, and working to save so many people. And I know that I was quite moved living in the headspace of Varian and thinking every day about the preciousness of life, and really, considering the suffering of these refugees and displaced people, and the conflict of like feeling so invigorated with purpose. And so I really enjoyed telling this story, and at the end we get to say, she says, I've never felt more alive, just an acknowledgement of how amazing this experience has been. And it was sort of like a profound thing to be able to have moments like that on screen where it sort of reverberates between the people and the characters. And so that was a really nice moment.
Also, Cory's an incredible actor and so beautifully cast in this role that I felt the intimidation that Mary Jane feels towards Varian in the scenes where I just so desperately wanted to please him and for him to like me, but yet everything I was doing was annoying him and upsetting him.
I was not annoyed by Gillian. Let that be clear.
Yes, but it was Cory is such a wonderful actor that I felt it so deeply where I was like, everything I'm doing is so wrong. I just want to make this man happy.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I hope in the future that we get to do another project together and have more scenes together, because he's extraordinary. So.
That's really nice, Gillian. Thank you.
Ja, ganz klassisch. Also erstmal wir waren ja in Marseille. Ich bin ein bisschen früher nach Marseille gefahren, und Max Ernst hat ja da teilweise eben auch viel Zeit verbracht, eben in dieser Villa vom Emergency Rescue Committee, wo die sich alle versteckt haben. Hab da ein bisschen mehr Zeit verbracht, als üblich vielleicht. Und wie ich es gerade eben schon angedeutet habe, also habe natürlich recherchiert. Es gibt ein wunderbares Buch, was ich jedem empfehlen kann, von Markus Orts, ein Roman, der über das Leben von Max Ernst, der heißt Max, wo, abgesehen natürlich auch von der Kindheit, anhand seiner Begegnungen mit Frauen, mit denen er zusammen war, es ist ja ein unheimlich aufgeteiltes Leben. Also der hat ja an so vielen verschiedenen Orten gelebt, mit verschiedensten Menschen, hat sich aus Not wegbewegen müssen, war interniert im Lager. Und an diese ganzen Kapitel auch gefächert durch seine Begegnungen. Und das ist ein wunderbares Buch, wo man auf ganz irre Weise, finde ich, ein Gefühl kriegt. Nicht nur ein Faktenwissen, Wikipedia, nicht nur Fakten und Timelines und was ist wann irgendwie passiert, weil das ist, wie gesagt, ja gar nicht verkörperbar, gar nicht spielbar so richtig, sondern man kriegt so ein bisschen Gefühl zu dem Mann. Das kann man dann glauben oder nicht glauben, aber ich fand das sehr interessant, das hat mir geholfen. Und ansonsten, ja, bisschen Französisch gelernt, so eine Sachen. Und angereichert und dann ist es halt so, dann muss man das Ganze auch alles wieder vergessen, weil die Szenen sind dann sehr spezifisch und so viel Platz war ja auch nicht. Das heißt, man muss sich dann auch reinbegeben und mit allem, was man so in sich trägt, auch schauen, was passiert.
Ehrlich gesagt, ich habe sehr viel gelesen einfach über diese Zeit, über sie. Ich habe ihre Biografie gelesen, Mein Weg über die Pyrenäen. Und man kriegt da so ein bisschen Eindruck, wer das ist, wie sie die Welt sieht, was ihr Humor ist, was sie berührt, was sie uninteressant findet. Und ich muss aber sagen, wenn man gute Bücher hat, dann kommt auch so quasi dieses Kreativitätsgetriebe auch ins Rollen und ja, es arbeitet in einem so. Und ich hatte auch tolle KollegInnen, ja, also genau.
Well, we shot in many of the real locations, and the city really opened it up to us. I mean, we shot in the Camp de Mille, which was the internment camp. That was the real internment camp. We shot in the real prison in the city, the Fosse Nicolas. We shot in a villa that was not the real villa because the real villa was torn down, but one that was nearby. It was similar. It had been preserved since the 40s. But what was probably the most impressive was that we shot in the real Hotel Splendide, and it was rebuilt by Silke Fischer, our production designer, and her team, the amazing art department in France. Took this building that had really sort of fallen into disrepair and was being used as a government office and rebuilt the lobby of the hotel in the place where it had been, and also rebuilt the hotel rooms. So that was, so we were looking at the real view that they had been looking at from the original ERC office. I mean, that was very moving, and I think we all felt like this kind of, goosebumps being able to shoot in the real location.
Marseille, dieses Licht auch und diese Natur, das ist ja so gewaltig und so bildkräftig. Und natürlich ist es immer toll bei historischen Stoffen, wenn du dementsprechend die Kostüme hast und das Szenenbild, weil du dann komplett in einer anderen Welt existierst. So. Ja, und es war irgendwie schön, weil wir da alle so gestrandet sind in diesem Marseille und auch niemand jetzt hier so verwurzelt war und deswegen hat die Arbeit, also wie soll ich sagen, wir waren auch privat sehr oft zusammen und haben über die Bücher gesprochen, über den Prozess gesprochen, über die Geschichte, die wir erzählen wollen und so. Und es war sehr toll, ja.
Ach schön, es ist immer, wenn man an einem anderen Ort ist und man sich auf die Arbeit freut und man auch angespannt ist, aufgeregt ist. Und dann noch natürlich irgendwie, man hat die Kostümproben gehabt, wie du es sagst, man taucht so ein bisschen ein in eine andere Welt. Das ist immer sehr aufregend. Für mich ist immer so, muss man sich so vorstellen, man geht so tastend mit kleinen Schritten voran und schaut und guckt die ersten Tage, orientiert sich und versucht in den Szenen, in den Situationen, sich auf die Situation, sich auf die Momente und auf die anderen Figuren und Mitspieler zu konzentrieren. Und dabei ist eigentlich selber zu entdecken, was passiert, ohne zu wissen, was jetzt hier passiert. Natürlich habe ich einen Plan oder so, ich habe was vor, aber es ist ein bisschen so wie, man lässt die Schatzkarte zu Hause, ja, man geht nicht so rum, sondern man hat die sich mal angeschaut und man hat die sich ja für sich entwickelt und dann hat man die verloren und dann fährt man los.